Viva pessoal, bem-vindos a mais um BANGCAST, o podcast da revista Bang. O meu nome é Lucifer, sou o vosso anfitrião e tenho comigo, como sempre, o Bruno Martins Soares, o Luís Filipe Silva e uma convidada muito especial, a Anne Bishop. Hello, Anne.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to have you here in our podcast. You already came to Portugal a few years ago to the first edition of Bang Festival. It was a huge success.
Yes.
People went crazy. We plan to have you here again when you feel ready to travel to Europe. But today we'll have you here. We have questions from your Portuguese readers and maybe some questions from our own heads as editors and as fans also. So you want to talk a little bit about your last months, last years, because COVID took us 2 years, right?
Yeah. I was in Portland, Oregon on a book tour when everything started to close down in March of 2020. And I got home just ahead of the country closing down. So I kept my fingers crossed all the way across the country going, please let me go home. Please let me go home. And then I spent 2 years in lockdown, which when you're a writer and you're used to working at home, you don't notice until you have to go out for groceries and get everything, all the masks and things. So I didn't have it quite as bad, I think, as people who weren't used to working at home. And so I produced my books on time. I wrote Crow in 2020, which I think is probably a little bit darker because I wrote it in 2020. And then last year, I wrote The Queen's Price and just turned that in 2.5 weeks ago. So
congratulations.
So yeah, I've just kept writing because that's what that's an easy thing to do. You can write and you can read and you can talk to friends.
You still get goosebumps when you deliver a book?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's more a sigh of relief when I send it to my editor. The goosebumps come when I see it in the store. Okay. That first time when I see it on the shelves, that's still that thrill. And I found out that Crowbones has made the USA Today bestsellers list. So
well, congratulations!
That
again.
was exciting too. That was exciting.
I read I read that you have a very professional routine during the day to tackle the writing and the reviewing and such. Did you find that your routine may have changed during those weird times of the last 2 years, or did you manage to hang on and to do it as you usually do?
My writing routine stayed the same. I reported to work at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and I wrote until 1 or 1:30 and had lunch and then answered emails. And I quit at 5 o'clock. I made that my rule that I could quit at 5 o'clock at night. And I started taking 1 day a week off. That was my big thing. That's what COVID gave me, was 1 day a week off.
1 day at weekends?
No, weekends are actually my best writing time because everything else is shut down. So I don't get emails from people. I write from Saturday to Wednesday, and Thursday is my, what I call my mundane tasks day. So that's appointments and schedules and business and things. And Friday is my day to watch movies and read books and work in the garden as soon as it stops snowing. And
And then Saturday comes again.
and then Saturday comes again, and by then I've thought about the book and I'm ready for whatever the next section of the story is.
And do you have a number of words that you force yourself to write every day, or that you want to reach every day?
My goal is between 1,200 and 1,500 words a day, because that will give me about 6,000 words a week. And for the usual size of my books, that means I can finish in 6 or 7 months my first draft and have a week off, usually during the Christmas holidays, and then have 2 months to do my second draft before I have to turn the book in.
Wow.
That's usually my goal.
That's interesting. I always love to ask the writers how things work for them, the goals, people who have very strict goals and do not stop writing until they achieve the goals, or other writers don't have any goals. They can write a lot one day and then they don't write on the following day, no problem. It depends on the strategy.
Yeah. When I'm starting a new story, because I'm just getting into it and getting used to it, I think of 500 words as a good day, because I'm just learning and I'm just figuring things out. And
That's
then it keeps
like a page. One
yeah,
page,
and
right?
then it keeps gaining until I'm up to my full 1,500 words. And by the time I get to about the 3/4 mark, it's just going as fast as it can. And
What was
it's
your
it's a good thing that the computer does automatic spelling.
Yeah, no.
Which book was your fastest book to write?
They all seem to come in at around the same time. So I think Crowbones and Lake Silence were a little bit easier to write because they were built on the template of a cozy mystery. So I knew that I was going to have my amateur sleuth, or 2 of them, and I was going to have at least one dead body, although it's the others, so there were lots of dead bodies. And they were going to get in trouble. So those were the 2 that were easiest, because you just throw down
Structure was
corpses
simple.
and
Yeah.
I was
Okay,
serious.
and
I was serious thinking that you are eager for the Saturday, like most people, but not for the same reason. You're not much of a plotter, as I know from your words, if I understood them correctly. Your books seem filled with twists and turns and plot. They are thick with plot, but they are also thick with the characters and voices. Usually, what drives most of your books? Is it the people in them? Is it the voices? Is it the story, or is it a bit of both, or it depends on the book?
it's the characters, because these are imaginary people that have to feel real to me, and I am going with them on this journey and recording this journey of something that happens in their lives. So everything is about how they feel, what decisions they make, who they're going to love, who they're going to hate, who is going to be an enemy, who's going to be a friend. Those are all of the things they have a problem that they have to solve, and I just say go for it, and I watch what happens. And the first draft is usually very I write hot, so I'm writing what they say and their movements. And then when I go back the next day to kind of warm up my brain into that story, is when I add details of a descriptive reaction or something else, so that it's all layered.
Mhm.
But the first thing is always character, because I'm interested in who these people are and where they're going and why they're going there.
And which one of them has surprised you the most by doing something that they weren't supposed to do?
All of them.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I
Wonderful.
usually call it the how do you the magician's apprentice effect.
It
It
is,
just
because I'll be
get out of
typing
control.
along, and I'll be hearing what they're saying to each other, and I'm typing, and all of a sudden I stop and go, "How could you do that? How?" And it's just
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if it surprises me, then it surprises the reader. If it makes me laugh, it usually makes the readers laugh. If it makes me cry, it usually makes the readers cry, and then they grumble at me for crying. But I cried more because it took me longer to write it than it took them to read it. So there.
Yeah.
And we invited our fans, your fans here in Portugal, to send us questions. So we are going to make the questions and see where this will take us. Luis, do you want to start with
Yeah.
the first questions?
Yeah, we'll start off with a question by Margarida Souza from Multipublicações. And she asks you, we know that you've started writing very early on, but what led you to the fantasy genre?
I love fantasy. It's fantasy does two things. You can have fun with it because it has magic. And stories that have magic are just wonderful. It's also a safe ground because I explore things that are for adults. You know, a lot of my subjects are about difficult things that happen to people. And it would be too hard to write it in a world that looked like ours. If I couldn't write it in like a contemporary story, I couldn't write what I write. But in fantasy, you have this safe space with magical animals and magic and jewels and shapeshifters and elementals who get really, really nasty. And you can look at these things in a way that allows characters to win. Because you want a story, if you're going to deal with something difficult, you want the characters to win. You want them to have a successful outcome. And I find that in fantasy. So that's the thing that always gets me excited about it.
Another question, this time from Tita, from the blog O Prazer das Coisas. Recently, you released the book The Queen's Bargain. What was it like to return to the world of the Black Jewels after all these years?
It was hard because I've been moving forward with the stories that I've been writing. I had been away from the Black Jewels for 6, 7, 8 years before I started. And going back to those people was wonderful because I love those characters. But remembering all of the details, because this is a very intricate world, and their family relationships is just, there's so many things going on in their lives.
You had to reread the novels?
I reread the last 3 because those were the ones that I was jumping off of. And then I was working with notes and looking things up. Ebooks were wonderful for that because what did this, you know, I wanted a particular description and I could find it and highlight it in the ebooks to make sure that I had descriptions and things, because the readers have been reading these books for every year since they've come out, and they know the details so much better than I do, and all of a sudden there's one thing in the Queen's Bargain, no, in the Queen's Weapons, where we meet one of the younger people, and my brain just went on vacation that day, and I said that she wore a purple dust jewel, and then several chapters later she wore an opal jewel. And I get emails from readers saying, there's something wrong. How come, how did this happen? She didn't make her offering or anything. And all I can say is, I messed up. I'm sorry.
Do you enjoy reading your books? Or it's something that you avoid doing anyway?
I like them when I can, but I've always been moving forward. So there's that feeling of not being able to go back unless it's complete. The two books in the Black Jewels world, The Shadow Queen and Shalador's Lady, because they're a complete story, I can go back and read those because it has a beginning and an end. It was harder with the Black Jewels because I was still going forward in the lives of those characters and trying to finish their overall life arc. And since they live centuries, that was taking a while. So, yeah, I can listen to some of the others books because they're just fun, and I'll listen and make notes. And the other thing about listening to it as an audiobook is that I hear the story differently because there's a different voice. So all of a sudden I hear things that I want to improve in my writing. I hear details that sound different because someone else's voice is saying the words. I always listen to the audiobooks when they come in so that I know first what my listeners are hearing, and also because it teaches me something about the story that I couldn't see while I was writing it.
But what's your feeling? Do you enjoy it, or is it work, or how do you feel about it?
Oh, I have fun with them. I have fun. Okay. I mean, there are some stories in the Black Jewels world, some of the shorter stories, Lucifer and Marian's courtship, that I always have fun with because he's just, he tries so hard, he tries so hard.
Well, Luis, we have a third question?
Yes, we have a third question, this time around from Magda Pais. One of her questions is similar to the one we just asked, and so I'm going to jump to the second one, which is, for someone who isn't familiar with your books, which one would you recommend starting with?
It depends on what kind of fantasy you like. If you like urban fantasy, you would start with Written in Red.
Yes.
In the chat.
Well, for someone who likes the urban fantasy, the werewolves and the shifters and the vampires, you start with Written in Red because that's urban fantasy. If you like dark fantasy in a totally different world with dark magic and dangerous people and a very epic struggle for power,
and then something completely different in the world, which is completely different from anything.
Yeah. You start with Daughter of the Blood because that's the first of the Black Jewels.
Luis,
and I have two other worlds, but a lot of times people don't find them until after they've read the Black Jewels and the others. Ephemera is different from both of those. The Tira Lane books are different from, I never saw a reason to create a similar world from the one I had built, because what's the point? If you're going to take the time to make a world, make it different, make the magic different, do something else so that you're challenged by the story. So each one of the worlds that I built is unlike the others.
Luís, another one?
Yeah, from Vera Neves, from Sinfonia dos Livros. She has a very interesting question, which I'm going to also to add something to it. She asks, do you like listening to music while writing, and which kind of music do you enjoy the most? I would like to add to this question, if when you write, if writing or the characters or the settings, if you are, let's say, inspired in your own writing by any music that you listen in your mind.
The Black Jewels began with an album called Koyana Skatsi by Philip Glass. The sound of those male bass voices, those deep voices, and the organ, I could picture Eben Ascovy, the Keep. I could picture them walking down those stairs to the Dark Throne. And whenever I needed to have a touchstone for that world, that's the music that I would play. Other things, in the others, I play more Celtic instrumental music, things that'll either be quiet or upbeat. I'll have a series of things, and sometimes I end up playing the same 3 songs over and over, just repeating for that session, because that has the feel of what the characters are facing. And sometimes it's a longer list depending on the day. But yeah, some of it inspires, some of it I can see a scene just by hearing the music. So
what authors inspire you? What authors are the references that you have in your mind as have influenced you over the years?
I deliberately don't read fantasy when I'm drafting, so that I don't cross-pollinate, because I don't want to take someone else's ideas and not recognize that they don't belong to me. I like Patricia Briggs. I like Charles DeLint. I read The Mysteries by Louise Penny and C.S. Harris, because those are things I can read on the days that I'm drafting. I've been reading different nonfiction books by Mary Roche. So amongst the things that I'm going to be reading to see what kind of story ideas they will have are Stiff about corpses, and Spook about the afterlife, and Grunt about war. And I'm really looking forward to kind of letting my brain just wallow in this.
One more from the ball, from Paulo Douros. No, sorry, from Luís Pinto. Out of all your characters, which one resembles yourself the most?
Oh.
Whoa,
Oh.
That's a dangerous question.
That's a dangerous question.
Okay. Of the ones that resemble me the most, I think would be Cassie from the Black Jewels and Vicky from the others. I aspire to become surreal someday. or Belladonna or Janelle. But right now I'm still Vicky or Cassie. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a sequel to that question myself, which is, would you like to meet some of the characters or avoid them?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to spend a week with Damon and Lucifer. I want to spend a week in the courtyard with Simon and Meg. Yeah.
That wouldn't scare you?
Oh yeah, but there's just so much fun. It'll be fun.
And if you had to choose one of your worlds to live, which world would you choose to pass the rest of your life?
That depends on who I could be, but I think it would be even odds between the courtyards and the Black Jewels world. I couldn't decide between those two because, well, I've lived in the Black Jewels world for over 30 years now. That's when I first, it's been over 30 years since I first began developing that world and those characters. So it's a very familiar place, and I could hang out with them for a while. And and I could learn how to brush wolves in the courtyard.
Moving to Paulo Douros, also another interesting question. Do you find it difficult to kill your main characters and consequently shock your readers? Within the Black Jewels universe, you get the feeling that no matter how well developed the villains are, they always end up defeated and unable to eliminate any of the characters.
Do I have trouble killing my good characters, the people that I truly like and love? Yes, it hurts a lot. It hurts. Do I want the villains to be defeated? Absolutely, because this is fantasy. We get to win. We want the people to win. We get to cheer and see the bad guys lose. And I want that. I want that.
Yeah.
But yes, when I have to kill off one of my characters that I really like,
do you
I cry
try
a
to
lot.
save
So,
them?
Yeah,
Do you try to save them the best you can? Or is it something that, it's fate? It's a writer's fate, so to speak.
I let them be who they are, and I let their story unfold. And if it comes down to them being gone, then that's the way it is. When I wrote the Tira Lane trilogy, I knew from the beginning of the third book that we were going to lose Morag, who was probably my favorite character in that book. And I knew from the first sentence that I was going to lose Morag. And that was so hard. It was so hard. By the time I finished that book, my health was actually frail because it took so much from me emotionally to write it and to let that happen.
I have a question that I want to make. It's from Nadia Batista, and she asks, thinking of all the characters you've created, who would you kiss, who would you marry, and who would you kill? This is a very good one. Who would you kiss, Anne?
I have to choose just one?
No, of course not.
Damon.
I knew it.
Damon Sadi. Kiss, marry. Who would I kill? There's a list.
You cannot, I just realized you cannot tell because it's going to be a spoiler.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that they did die. It's just, if I could kill them now, would I do it? And I said, well, yeah, there are the people who held Meg, and had her enslaved. I'd be willing to let the elders go and stomp them. Yeah, I would cheer them on, but yeah, all the bad guys should get stomped. All the
Can
bad
I do a
guys.
question now?
Sure.
Can I do one? Okay.
Sure.
Let me do one by Katia Marques. Okay, which is about Ephemera. Are you planning to return to Ephemera as well?
I don't know. I don't know, because the muse and I are thinking about where to journey next. And that's a possibility, you know? It depends on whether I cross a bridge and get there.
Ora bem, e chegou agora a altura de vos relembrar, para quem nos costuma ouvir, sabem isto, temos um código promocional para vos oferecer, no valor de 5 euros, que podem descontar na vossa loja favorita, a saída de emergência. E as condições podem ser consultadas na sinopse deste episódio. E, como sempre, a palavra que vocês têm que introduzir na loja vai ser escolhida pela nossa convidada, Anne Bishop. Anne, can you choose the word we'll be using in this promotion?
Belladonna, the name of one of my characters in Ephemera. So
Great.
It's spelled Belladonna.
2 L's, 2 N's.
Yes.
It's a tricky word, so quem quiser meter isto no voucher tem que estar atento. 2 L's, 2 N's. Great. So, Bruno, you want to make a new question?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I do. Okay, so it's another one by Tita, which is simple and hard. Which is, what are your favorite characters?
In Tear Lane, it's Ashk and Morag. In Ephemera, it's Belladonna and Sebastian. In the Courtyards, it's Simon and Meg. And also Vicky and Ilya, who live in another part of that world. Damon and Lucifer in the Black Jewels. Those are my guys. They've been with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to drop one of my own. If you were not a writer, what would you be doing for a living, Anne?
Oh, I don't, well, I would probably like to work in a zoo, although I'm allergic to animal fur, so that would be difficult. Which is why all of my animals, all of my worlds have animals, and they're all virtual. So, these are my pets. Yeah.
And the courtyards seems a little bit like a zoo, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
It's a lonely profession to be a full-time writer, and
well, I have all of these friends in my head that keep me occupied during the day, and I make sure that I stay in contact with real people, with friends and family, and get out. Well, up until for the past 2 years, we've all been a little bit isolated, but otherwise, I make a point to stay in touch with people because that's important. And otherwise, during the writing time, I'm occupied and have plenty to do. So I don't notice people. I don't notice that I'm not with people until I shut off the computer and I'm no longer with my imaginary people.
Then let me follow up with a strange question, which is, are you writing when you're not writing?
Always. Yeah. Yeah.
Because obviously your worlds are very intricate with a lot of rules, a lot of different kinds of magic, and you have to be thinking a lot about them to settle all the stories and characters, don't you?
Well, yes, and everything gets thrown into. I think of it like a big creative stew. Everything gets thrown in. And an example, I was out in the garden when I was writing Written in Red. So this was a while ago. This was several years ago. But I was out in the garden and I noticed this odd looking red thing. And it turned out that a cat had caught a bunny. And what I was seeing was the spine and one of the feet. And it was just laying on stone. And I said many icky, squishy things. But I put that in the book. I mean, Meg finds the spine of a bunny that somebody's partially eaten, and Simon has to go and, bury it. So yeah, I took that and added it to the book because I knew how it felt to find it.
Façam like, subscrevam, partilhem e comentem. Que sejam épicos.
Yeah.
And your family and your friends, closest friends, do they read your novels?
Yeah. And especially the
Better
courtyard
readers?
books. Pardon?
They are your better readers or just normal readers?
No, they are the ones who read it after everybody. I have a couple of friends who are my first readers, but they're more tuned in to being able to give me the kind of feedback that I need. Everybody else just reads them. And if you look in the fronts of the courtyards books, or wherever the acknowledgement page is in the Portuguese editions, and you see the list of people who gave their names, who let me use their names, as just said, sure, go ahead, you can kill me, it's okay. And all of those people, they're all friends. And so they're reading the book and going, oh, I did what? I did this? I got a wolf.
This is also eventually a part of the, let's say, responsibility of being a successful writer, because now you have a larger audience and following and fans than when you started a few decades ago. So do you have that in the back of your mind when you're writing, that people are expecting this or I expected that, they might not like this? Or do you still feel that sense of freedom of walking about in those places that you did in the first time?
I have the same two rules now that I had when I started writing the first book, and that is, my first promise is to the characters that I will not judge them. I will write their story as honestly as I can, and I will not try to make them something that they are not. They will be who they are. Fragile, angry, devious, wicked, whoever they are. And the second promise I make is to the readers to write the story to the very best of my ability. And those are the two promises that I still make when I start a story. There are readers who aren't happy with some of the ways books have gone, or some of the people who have left, died. But that's the story. That's the journey that these characters are making. So my first promise is to the characters, because there's nobody else who can make that promise.
I bet you're now read by several different generations. Do you feel there's a difference on how your stories are read and interpreted by the different generations, or by a younger generation and an older one? Do you have that feeling?
Sometimes I have heard with the Black Jewels, I will get sometimes an email from a fan who says, I first read the Black Jewels trilogy when I was 12. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
and then it says, and I read it again when I got to college. And I realized that there was a lot of stuff that I didn't understand the first time. And I'm thinking, yes, thank you. So there's there's a range. There's a huge range of. I have fans who are 12, and I have fans who are 80, and I'm sure that they're seeing different things based on how much experience they've had and how much life they've had. But the stories intrigue them and bring them back. So yeah, that's and I have families who will read the books together
Wow.
and have discussions.
Wow.
And
Jesus.
so
That's good. It's like a book club, but inside a family.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have a question from João Gonçalves. He asks, which of your worlds would you like to see in a TV series? If you had to choose one.
I think the others would be the easiest one to translate into TV. The one that could be interpreted the best. The Black Jewels would be difficult just because of the adult themes. I mean, you know, the Courtyard, you have plenty of people getting eaten, but that's different from what the Black Jewels does.
You were ever
Yeah.
contacted by a studio to
We've had a
acquire
few
the right-
inquiries. We've had a few inquiries, but they've never gone beyond
inquiries.
them talking to my agent. So
Maybe
I
one
don't
day.
worry about it. If it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to keep writing stories to the best that I can and have fun with it. Because I do have fun. I have friends. I have friends who tell me that I approach things with homicidal glee. So
It's always the best feeling.
Regarding homicidal glee, what's the easiest part about writing when you begin a new book? And what's the hardest part? And this question is from Vera Neves. The easiest part and the hardest part. Can you identify them?
the easiest parts are the lighter scenes, the dialogue, and when characters are playing with each other, and or they're getting into trouble that isn't terrible. Just you know, it's like when Meg scolds the elders, and poor Nathan is just about to shed his fur because he's just, you know, she's yelling at them about not getting cookies. And that was fun to write. The ones that are hard are any of the scenes that are dark, that are where people are threatened or are hurt. Those are hard to write. It's hard to write from the point of view of one of the villains, because I live in that skin during the time that I'm writing. So I have to inhabit that world. I have to believe what that villain believes. I have to take that world view as if everyone else is wrong. And some days that's really, really hard.
And as a writer, if George Martin says, and he's not the only one, that there are two types of writers in his mind: the gardener and the architect. The architect plans everything, all the details from his story, but the gardener plans a little bit and let things flow, and sometimes the book goes on a non-intended path, and it's totally different from the initial idea. How do you see yourself?
I'm the gardener.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought
Because I know well, taking the gardening thing, I prepare the ground and I set out some of the decorative rocks throughout, and then I plant so that I have touchstones, and I know that I have to reach this place, and I know this has to happen before I reach that place, and then all of a sudden something else unfolds because I see where it is, and I usually know I have an ending that I'm heading toward. It's not always the ending that you see by the time we get to the finished book, but I have a goal that the characters and I are heading toward, and then I just try to keep it weeded.
And do you think that comes with experience? So an experienced writer tends to be more a gardener, and a new writer more of an architect type, or that's not how it works?
No, I think it's important to find out what works best for you as a writer. Because if I tried to outline or plot everything in a story, by the time I got to the end of it, I would be bored with that story. I would be done. There would be no reason for me to go to the keyboard, because part of the reason I get up and I turn on the computer is to find out what happens next. I have an idea, but dialogue, things that the characters say to one another, can change it. There are times when outside circumstances can change things. If it's a rainy day, the whole atmosphere and mood of a scene can be different than if it was sunny out, in my life. So no, I don't think I would ever be able to plot a story that was more than a couple of pages. I could never do it with one of my novels, because it wouldn't be fun anymore.
Okay, we have more questions from a couple of questions.
Yes, I think we have just answered a question by Nadia Batista, which is something similar to what Luís had asked. I would like to ask one from Paulo Dores again. Although Lucifer and Demon still have a lot of development potential, do you intend to continue the universe of the Black Jewels through their offspring?
A new generation.
I can't answer that, because you don't have the Queen's price yet.
Oh.
Spoiler alert.
So
another one by Vera Neves. Of all the series you've written so far, which one defines you the most, and which one is your favorite?
They're all my favorites. The one whichever book I am writing at that moment is my favorite, because it's new and fresh and exciting. And if I didn't like them, I couldn't write in that world. So I like all of them. And I will not choose a favorite amongst the book children.
Okay. And which one do you feel defines you the most? Which one do you feel people identify you with? Maybe.
I don't know, because I'm in all of them. I mean, the bedrock of all of those worlds and all of those stories is who I am. So they all define me.
And now that we are reaching the end, what should we have asked that we didn't ask?
Well, one question a lot of readers want to know is if I'm going to go back to the lakeside courtyard and tell more of Meg and Simon's story. And the answer is I don't know yet. I won't know until the story comes to the surface and I start writing it, because that's how it works for me. But otherwise,
so
hopefully,
now you've delivered your manuscript to the publisher. So how's your ritual now? After you delivered it, what do you do? Do you rest? Do you have a little vacation? What do you do?
I have a stack of books that I wasn't able to read while I was writing because the voices would interfere with my story. So I get to read those, and I get to watch movies, and I get to sleep. And we're getting into spring, so that whenever it's warm out, I get to start working in the garden and start planning where I'm going to do my next plotting.
And regarding this question, Anne, with this COVID thing, you had to interrupt your book tours. Do you miss them? Do you think they are important? They are work, of course, but do you miss those book tours each time you launch a new novel?
Yes. In fact, I was able to do my first in-person book signing at a local Barnes & Noble, not far from where I live. And it was wonderful to see people again, to actually come into a bookstore and have people there to talk about the books. And that was great. That was great. I do a virtual book signing every year where I can send out book plates to fans. And I do it in February because it takes me quite a while to get them done. And it's open to everyone, all the fans around the world. So I know I have some from Portuguese. I have fans from Portuguese who will be getting a book plate when I get to the international list. And that's fun too, because it's a chance to give them something that's an autograph when I can't reach everybody. So it's fascinating to see where the books end up, because there are places where I had no idea that I was being read in some of those countries, and it's just fun to see it.
Any chances Anne Bishop will write something that it's not fantasy one day, with no fantasy elements whatever?
I did write one story that was not fantasy. It was in a collective novel, and it was a contemporary story in a made-up town, but it was Earth, and there was no magic. And it was about a young woman and her parakeet who moved down to a southern town. That's the only one, really, that I've written that did not have any magic in it. I just like magic.
You like magic, right?
I like magic.
Bruno Luis, any last question?
Yes, I'd like to ask. Probably your stories are always. I'll say that your stories are hard to contain in a single volume. You need several thousands of pages, let's say, to properly develop and follow along your characters and your ideas, and also how they evolve through time. What about short stories? You haven't written many short stories, but I think you've started in that vein. Are you thinking of coming back to short stories and write more of them? How do you feel about them?
As a matter of fact, I wrote a short story set in the Others world. Well, it was a couple of years ago now, but it's coming out in May in an anthology called Heroic Hearts. Mm-hmm. And that was fun. It was the Others and pirates, because we're on a ship. It's called the Dark Ship. So that was fun. And I'd like to do more things that are shorter, because the big epic books, they're a lot of work. It would be fun to do something tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've done a few short stories. Not that many, because I don't have much free time when I'm writing the novels. But when I start a story and I write for however long it takes to finish it, and sometimes that's 5,000 words, and sometimes it's 150,000 words.
While you cannot visit your Portuguese readers, do you have a message you want to send them so that we can close this with Anne Bishop speaking with her Portuguese fans?
You are all wonderful, and I'm so glad that you like the books, and so glad that you love the worlds, because it's a celebration, and I am so happy to be able to share it with you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for your time and for your sympathy. Best of lucks with the book you just sent to your publisher. And really hope to see you again soon, if COVID allows us, of course.
Yes. Well, fingers crossed that we can do it.
Yeah, we would love it. Thank you so much, Anne. All
Thank
best.
you.
Thank you.
Obrigado.
Good night.